Lakeland PBS presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm producer-director Scott Knudsen. This week we continue with part 2 of 3 of Nate Johnson hide tanning.
We're essentially going to make a tube here. So this must be a deer that I shot probably 2 years ago, or maybe it was, 2 years ago. Finally catching up to it. It should be big enough for pants. They call this wringing. Wringing the hide, WR. You can see it kind of bubbling up. We're doing two things. One, we're drying it out, getting the water out of it, but we're also forcing the solution through the pores of the hide. And that gets it really in there, gets those fibers coated. You can pull pretty hard. This is a step where it's good to be patient. Like many things in life, just let it drip. All right, I'm gonna go back the other direction. So, same location, just going back the other way. So, rotate at a quarter turn. Repeat. So, our goal right now is to get as much moisture out as possible. Once we get it out and we take it off the beam here and stretch it back open, if this were a hide that I was doing this for the first time on, I would stretch it open and then we'd repeat this process. We'd let it dry out a little bit and then we'd brain it and wring it. And I usually do that 3 times. But since this has already been done, maybe twice, maybe only once. We'll see, I might do it one more time, but first we'll get all the water out and then open it back up, stretch it back open. Quarter turn. Not much moisture left in this one. That's good. Yeah, so this is really pulling open. It's got a lot of stretch to it, so after a couple brainings, we're obviously different than the raw hide you'd seen earlier. So the change is well underway. Look at that stretch back open. No longer dealing with rawhide. This is totally different. And I'm just going around getting all the fibers stretched back open and pulled open. They kind of turn this whitish color once they're pulled open. Getting all those edges opened up. Okay. I think I'm going to brain it one more time. Just to be safe, I'm going to put it back in the solution. Most hides I do it 3 times, and I can't remember if I already did this once or twice, so I'm probably just going to put it back in. Flies. So that if you got this, I'll show you when I squeeze this, you'll see lots of air bubbles coming through the skin. That's a good sign. When you start to squeeze the skin and the air pushes through and makes bubbles, that's a good sign. That means that the fibers are opened up, and that means the solution is really penetrating. So we're just going to do this whole routine again. So this beaver hide has been soaking in wood ash for 2 days, and in the warm weather it's going really fast. Sometimes it takes longer. But I checked it this morning and it should be ready to go. The fur is loosened up. Just squeeze this out so it doesn't drip all over me, and then also I'll just save this and keep reusing this for the rest of the summer and fall for deer hides. So I always give it a little check and just kind of tug on the fur, and it pulls right out. So that's how I know that this hide has been bucked. We call it bucking. So it's been soaked in alkaline long enough that the fur is loosened. And we'll go over to the beam and scrape, get this fur off. So I got my beam over here. So the idea here is we want to get rid of the fur, but not damage what's called the grain layer of the skin, and that's a smooth layer right underneath. I'm just using my fingers, and if I were going to scrape a deer hide and I wanted to make buckskin and remove this smooth layer so that I get a fuzzy buckskin, or suede some people call it, then I'd be using my scraper, pushing hard and scraping off this layer of skin right below the hair or fur. But since I want to maintain this, we're making full grain leather here, like boot or belt leather. I'm just working with my hands so that I don't damage that grain layer. And sometimes if the hair is a little sticky, you can take a clump of fur and get any last remnants off there, but this is coming really cleanly. So that just means the hide was at the right stage from the bucking. See, there's a sticky spot of fur. Some people do this with a wooden tool, but I like my fingers because then it feels like there's no chance of damaging that grain layer. You know, you could put your hands on it without gloves, but long-term exposure, you'd get the alkali irritation for sure. Sometimes if I touch it with my bare hands, you can feel it's really slippery. When you rub your fingers together, feel really slippery, and that's that alkalinity. So if I do touch it briefly, then I just make sure to wash my hands with soap so that I don't get irritated skin. You know, to some people, this may seem like, oh, he's scrubbing with a little bit of beaver fur to help get rid of the minute remnants of beaver fur. But I just taught you the $1 million trick, and you thought it was no big deal.
And that's using beaver fur to get rid of beaver fur?
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those little things that works. And it's coming out real well. There's a couple, well, one patch of damaged grain along the edge, which is fine. And this was there's also a scar in here from fighting, springtime male fighting. But yeah, hair's coming off cleanly. I think it was at the perfect stage for this. Of course, if you don't buck it long enough, then the hair is really difficult to just slide off. And if you buck it too long, too much soaking in the wood ash, and the hide will start to disintegrate. Yeah, I'm just right now cleaning up, looking for any spots where any hair patches might have been sticky. So just getting rid of any little under fur. Just a little cleanup. All right, something like that. We're underway now. We've got an alkaline hide from the wood ash soaking, and so we need to neutralize it. We need to take the alkalinity out. Right now, after it's been soaked, it's kind of rubbery. It doesn't stretch. The fibers are kind of sucked together by the alkalinity. You can either put it in a stream of moving water, or you can soak it in an acid solution. So I like to just use a little bit of white vinegar mixed in with water, and that'll start to return it back to a neutral state. If you don't bring it back to neutral, it won't tan well. So it is a crucial step. So yeah, there's one cut in here, and there's an old scar, and probably another fighting scar there. And you know, there's still a story of the animal's life in this hide. So we've got our boiled sumac leaves in here. Brought it up to a boil, and I suppose let it boil for an hour, and it simmered for longer than that too. There's our tannin liquor, they call it. Yeah, if you were to taste this, it'd be really astringent. So if you've ever tasted an acorn, it kind of makes your mouth pucker. Wow, it's really strong. That's one way to tell if your bark liquor, your tannin liquor is strong enough, is taste it and spit it out. And the color is not necessarily indicative of the strength, though it is. There is correlation, but you can have a strong color without that many tannins, so really it's good to taste it and check it. But this is super concentrated. So this is the first boil of the bark and leaves, and obviously it's got the most tannins in it. It's coming out incredibly strong, and this is how what we use to finish the hides. I'll be doing 2 more boilings with this same batch of bark and leaves. The second boiling, of course, will be less strong, and the third boiling with different water will be pretty weak, so I'll have 3 different containers from each boiling. So my third boiling, the weakest solution, is what you start all your hides in. If you start it in the strongest solution, those tannins are sucked in and absorbed by the outside of the skin and create a barrier so that the center of the skin does not get tanned. So we start it in the third boil, and that allows the tannins to go all the way to the middle. And you'd have a tanned shell and a rawhide center. It wouldn't soften. So this is my strongest solution of tannins. So this is where, from the first boil, this is where I'm finishing hides. And I've got some in here finishing right now. So it's really dark. This has been soaking for probably a month almost. And boy, it's got to be getting close. The best test to see if it's done is to find the thickest spot of the hide, which is on most animals is either the rump or the neck. I'm just going to cut a little slit here and look and see if the color has worked its way all the way in. You know, it's not super obvious. It's still lighter colored in the middle, and this gets really tricky. It's not going to look the same color in the middle as it does on the outside, this really dark, rich brown, but it's not white anymore. I think this still needs longer, so I'm going to let it keep going. I have some here that have been here longer. I'd like to see a little more color in there, working its way to the center. So I'm going to let this one soak for a while longer. I'm going to check and see if there's one in here that's closer to done. Now, even though this one's lighter in color, this has been soaking longer, and that other hide was in a different mixture of tannins it started in, so I used some different barks, and it got dyed a lighter color, which does not mean it's more tanned, it just got more colored. So, but this one has actually been in quite a bit longer, and I'm going to check here too. Yeah, this is more what I like to see here. It's much more, the color from the outside edge is penetrated much further in. It's still lighter colored here, but it's not white rawhide. That color is much more penetrated in. It's still lightish in the center of the skin, but it's not white like rawhide, and it's a little bit of a darker hue than that other one I looked at. I would consider this one mostly done, but I'm still going to give it a couple more days. And just because I re-strengthened the tannins now, so there's a lot of really strong tannins in this, and you know, the thin parts are surely, the belly's always thinner. Here's a piece of belly skin, and that's penetrated all the way through, so they call that struck through is the term, so that it's struck through, the tannins have reached the center, and it's fully tanned in the thinner spots. But I'm going to give this, I think, just a few more days. It takes a while, week maybe, I don't know, not in a hurry. I just want to make sure it's done properly. So I've got 4 hides in this, and it'll really soak up those tannins. Four hides will, you know, I'll come back here in 4 days, and the water will be considerably lighter colored. It will absorb a lot of the tannins and the dye, you know, the coloring in the bark. So try to stir them every day. Here's that beaver that's been soaking in some vinegar and water. It's actually starting to grow again. It's getting bigger. As it goes to neutral, it was all swollen together, and as we start to neutralize it, it'll get bigger, but it's still swollen. It's still alkaline. It's just kind of rubbery, and there's no stretch to it. It's just tight. So I think I'm going to switch out this water for some fresh water and put a little more vinegar in there and keep rinsing it. A little more vinegar. I'll just keep adding vinegar periodically and checking it over the next couple hours, and sometimes it takes most of a day. I go slowly, but well, we've got our brained hide here for brain tanning, and I've just had it in the freezer. So before we get ready to soften it, I need to deal with some of these bullet holes. I guess I already sewed up the entrance hole. This is where the bullet entered here. The entrance hole, which is pretty small, and then here on the other side, this would be the exit hole, much larger. The bullet has expanded. So we got to sew this up. Some people don't sew their holes up, but I find it works much better to sew them up in advance. So I'm just going to sew it up from the inside of the hide. This is the flesh side. And I'm just going to clean up these edges and kind of straighten it out a little bit so it's less of an abrupt curve. And I've just got I've got here some deer backstrap sinew. This is the fibers that run along the backstrap of the deer. And I often will use artificial sinew, but if I'm trying to be super homemade about what I'm doing, then I use deer sinew with all the my fur sewing, I try to use actual sinew. And it's, yeah, it's an ancient thread, super strong, strips apart into layers. We're kind of just gradually pulling it apart. We save all the sinew from the deer that we hunt. Gotta get it just the right thickness. So, yep, just getting it wet, and then I'll twist it up here. Okay, there's an ancient thread, super strong. And I like to sew with a sharp as opposed to a glover's needle. It just makes a smaller hole. Glover's needle has a triangular tip and cuts a hole as you sew. They're made for leather. On the other hand, it also cuts a hole as you sew. So in this case, this hide's about to be stretched and stressed, and if we use a glover's needle, the holes will tend to get bigger, and the sharp, on the other hand, pokes its way through without cutting a hole. So overhand knot twice through, a little stopper knot. I'll leave that loop open. Yeah, we've got a warm day here. I should probably work fast so this hide doesn't start to dry on me, but I'll kind of keep it bunched up so it doesn't dry. I'm just going to do a simple whip stitch. Sinew does leave a slightly larger diameter for real sinew than I would if I were using a synthetic thread, so it gets a little harder to pull through. But yeah, my understanding sinew was just like I did it, wetted and twisted, and that's your thread. So I end just by, rather than tying a knot, I just backstitch 3 stitches through the same holes, and then that will create enough friction the stitches shouldn't come loose. Just leave that long for now and I can cut it short later. So this, and even though it's kind of funky now, as we soften it, that will all stretch and lay flat. So I got to make holes. I'm going to lace this up in a frame right here, and I got to just go around and make holes for the string. Cut your slits parallel, maybe every, what, 6 inches? I don't know. Every so often. There's a hole there already, I'll just use that. You don't want to be too close to the edge of the hide when you do this, otherwise it'll just rip out. Like this hole's probably going to rip out, but I'll use it anyway. So maybe 3/4 of an inch in from the edge. I always try to put my holes on if there's a projection in the hide, put the hole there. I like the bowline on a bite. If you don't know how to tie a bowline knot, go ahead and learn, and it'll change your life. I'm going to start by just loosely lacing it up, and I'll go back and tighten it all up once I got it where I want it. Now to get warm. Yeah, so if you want to soften 2 hides at once, then, well, I've got a frame here for another hide, and you can lean them together and do them at the same time, but I just have this one ready to go, so I will often do 2 at once. It's just more efficient. And I've got here my trusty softening stake, which is just a pole with the end sharpened roughly with an axe and a knife. The whole idea here is we want to stretch this hide the whole time it's drying. If we don't keep all the fibers moving and pulled apart, they'll stiffen up. As long as we keep them pushed and moving and stretching while the skin is drying, they should remain soft. So I just go around the hide with my softening stake until it's done. And you don't have to stretch them out in a frame like this. You can just do them by hand, and you can put a stake in the ground and pull it over a stake, or a cable in a tree and pull it around a cable, or just tug on it with friends. But this stretches the hide open and it dries really fast. And then I'm just going to go along, and the edges dry first because it's hard to work the edges with my stake. I just need to do that by hand. And especially at first, those edges are already drying, and I just need to pull them open and keep them from getting stiff by keeping the edges soft. These holes are less likely to rip out. And then repeat. I know the hide still has moisture in it because when I push it, it leaves a clear line and indent from my stake. It stays in there. And as the hide loses moisture, those strong indents will start to fade. Still there.
Thanks so much for watching. Join us again next week for part 3 of Nate Johnson hide tanning. If you have an idea for common ground in north central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call 218-333-3014. To watch Common Ground online, visit lptv.org and click local shows. To order episodes or segments of Common Ground, call 218-333-3020. Production funding of Common Ground was made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people November 4th, 2008. If you watch Common Ground online, consider becoming a member or making a donation at lptv.org.